tweets, and I feel that some of his wisdom is pretty interesting, especially in the crypto space. Why don't I just invite him over? Anthony, come on board. Anthony, do you want to take the ejector seat, or do you want to take the regular seat? Come on.
You sit over there in case anyone gets ejected.
Do you want the helmet? Because you know they're going to ask you some questions. Let me give you one. Hang on. We do this with every conference. We try to use the props that, you want to try it on?
Sure. I haven't put one of these on in like 7 years.
That's right. I mean, you worked as...
Are you going to wear it?
Hang on.
He asked me if I was going to come answer questions. He didn't say we were going to do it with helmets on.
All right, guys. So tell us about Tilt Capital, and I know it got bought out. Explain what is Tilt Capital and what do you do?
Yeah, so I previously ran an early stage venture capital fund. We recently did a transaction where we merged with a multi-billion-dollar asset manager called Morgan Creek Capital. Morgan Creek, over the last 15 years, has been a firewall between institutional capital and new and emerging technologies and markets. And so obviously blockchain is one of those. And for us, the deal really made sense because it accelerates us about a decade in terms of building out all the institutional controls, compliance, operations, accounting, et cetera, functions. And for them, they've got experience, right? So they're a known quantity among a lot of these institutions, and they can raise a lot of capital very quickly. And so we see a lot of advantages in having the biggest pool of capital in the market and being able to deploy that quickly over the next 18 months.
Nice. How big is this capital, by the way?
I think the number that was reported was $500 million fund.
Nice. And are you going to stay with them, or are you going to...
I got to take this off. Go ahead. What do you say?
I said, are you going to stay with them, or are you going to...
Yeah. So myself, my partner Jason Williams, there's 3 partners on the fund. It's the 2 of us and Mark Yusko, who's the founder and CIO of Morgan Creek.
Nice. In general, I'm going to just move into the ICO realm. Personally, what do you feel is happening in the ICO space right now, and where do you think it's going to head in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, so this is probably a pretty unpopular opinion in this room. I've never invested in an ICO, and I think that most of them are illegal. I think that...
Did you say illegal?
Illegal.
Okay.
So my take is that a majority of them are securities. They've been offered as unregistered securities, and I think that we're starting to see some of that enforcement now. The regulators, frankly, probably aren't getting enough credit for the job they're doing in terms of they're not, banning cryptocurrencies, ICOs, et cetera. They're trying to take a soft stance on first enforcing on the people who are very bad actors, right, who are obviously fraudulent or kind of scammers. I think over time, though, we're going to see kind of the activities that happened over the last 18, 24 months get weeded out, and people aren't going to be allowed to do them anymore. And so for our fund, what we're interested in doing is buying equity in companies or real estate where the transaction is done on the blockchain. So this is known as the security tokens. And we think that for capital formation, that's going to be the best way for entrepreneurs to do it moving forward.
Why should the SEC even regulate this? Why don't we just let it be free for all? Let everybody come up with their own scenario. As long as they disclose it and post it on a wall saying, I'm going to make a coffee, I'm going to put 20% milk, 2% milk in there, and half a cup of vodka in there, it should be fine. I mean, they're doing an ICO as long as they do a full disclosure. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, it should be power to the people. Why do we have an intermediary like the SEC governing and making those rules for the people? Let the people make the rules.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of saying that I didn't make the rules, I just follow them, right? And I think that one of the issues specifically in Silicon Valley is we've taught founders over last decade, 2 decades, to that it's okay to break the rules, right? And so if you look at the Ubers of the world, the Airbnbs, they went to war with the taxis, with the housing departments, and frankly they beat them, right? And so the thing I continue to tell founders is it's one thing to fight the taxi union, it's another thing to mess with the SEC and United States securities law. And so one of those battles you got a shot at winning, and the other you're going to go to jail. And so I think that we're seeing that now. I mean, literally, there's states that are shutting these ICOs down that are unregistered securities. They just literally arrested 2 guys. One guy was getting on a plane, supposedly, right, trying to leave the country. Like, this stuff's real. And I think what we're going to see is more and more enforcement as people continue this. Now, over time, what do I think happens? The regulation probably evolves into an area where people are allowed to use some of these new mechanisms and new technologies to raise capital.
Right.
But under the laws today, it's illegal, and I think that frankly, they're not enforcing the law to the full extent, and it's probably better off that way. But it's hard to tell who they're going to enforce on who they're not. So just don't break the law today and wait till the laws change.
Right. Now, I know you used Uber as an example. Now, if you look at Uber, Lyft, Airbnb, there's a new class of resources. They're not 1099 and they're not W-2 either. Do you feel there's a middle ground between security tokens and utility tokens or something where the SEC is not that cut and dry and allows for some leeway?
Yeah, here's the problem, right, is, and again, this will be incredibly unpopular, but if you look at the projects that are raising hundreds of millions of dollars, right, they've got 5 people working there.
Right.
It's just egregious greed.
Right.
And so, while I understand that, from a founder's perspective, right, I've started a bunch of companies, and I understand if the money's there, take it, right? And I get that mentality, and I understand it. But at the same time, I've got 2 rules in this space, right? It's don't be stupid and don't be greedy. And what we're seeing is just an egregious act of greed, and that's where people end up getting, caught up in trouble. And so I think, the ICOs in particular, that's who's getting enforced on first, or people who are absolute frauds and scams.
Yep.
And over time, that's going to evolve into the people who, they might have even tried to do the right thing, right, but they didn't. And here's the sad part is, I think that the law firms, right, that have been advising these ICOs and these founders and telling them, hey, this is legal, and they're wrong, it's going to be a big problem, right? And so, pretty much every major law firm I know at some point said utility token ICOs are okay.
Right.
Well, I think that we're seeing that might not be true, and so how that plays out is going to be really interesting to watch over the next year or so.
So let's talk about the lawyers. Why is it that the SEC cannot just list down the rules and then just get rid of the lawyers? Like, why do we have the lawyers to interpret somebody else's rules and then tell it to us? Like, I believe in information. If the information hops, as they grow bigger, the information gets diluted. Why can't we not just straight away get the rules straight away from SEC and not have to go through the lawyers to interpret all of that?
Yeah, so if you look in highly regulated industries, right, we've seen what founders do, right? And so, the Zenefits of the world, the Ubers of the world, like, founders are a very special breed of person, and most of them are type A personalities that are going to run through walls, right? And that's what makes them very special, and that's usually what gets these companies to a certain point of success. But in a highly regulated industry, those same people don't know when to put the brakes on. Right, and so the lawyers are kind of the referees in the room, if you will, a little bit, and they say, hey, that's crossing the line, and we can't do that. And so I think that having multiple types of personalities and experiences and kind of backgrounds in a room is important. And frankly, look, the SEC is not going to come out with guidelines until they fully understand the problem. Right?
But then that is the problem, right? By the time the SEC spends 2-3 months figuring this out, the technology has evolved.
Well, look what happened in South Korea. They banned it, they unbanned it, they banned it, they unbanned. Like, to me, that's worse, right?
Well, to me, that sounds like that they're scared in some way. They're not able to understand it, and why not just let it run?
So, look, the SEC, I've never seen before the SEC and the CFTC write an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal that literally said, we know what's going on, we want to encourage innovation, but you've got to play within the rules. Like, they could not be more clear about their position, right? And so what I found is, as I've talked to founders, everyone is using the excuse of, like, oh, I don't know better, or everyone else is doing it, right? It's laziness. Because guess what? You can do a ICO today,
right,
as a Reg D filing, Reg A+, Reg S. There's multiple pieces of legislation that exist to allow you to do this in a regulatory compliant way. The people who aren't doing that are doing it because they're either lazy or they're greedy. And, again, that's not going to be popular, but that's the truth. And people need to hear this from folks who are seeing this play out. And when we see people getting arrested, when we see people getting their ICOs shut down, money getting confiscated, like,
right,
this is U.S. securities law. This is not the taxi union.
What if, in a hypothetical scenario, we have an island, we take a bunch of ships, tie them together in international waters, and I say, hey, guys, you can do an ICO from this spot. What do you think about that?
I'm sure somebody out there's planning it. I have no idea. Look, I'm not a lawyer, right? That's the scary part. Is this is my opinion. I'm not the lawyers in the room, right? There's plenty of lawyers here probably that would have an opinion on that. But I think that's also to answer your question. Why do we need the lawyers? For things like that, right? Everyone's trying to figure out, do they use Switzerland? Do they use Singapore, Cayman Islands, Maldives, all these places? Like, you can make it super complex or you can make it really easy, right? And so I
Right.
think that really just comes down to what the appetite is and frankly, how much money some of these teams have to kind of figure it out.
Right. I know you said it earlier in our conversation that everybody or every ICO is a security token. What if there isn't actually a utility token, or you believe that there is never going to be a scenario for a utility token?
I think that most of the security tokens I'm seeing right now are going to be used as utilities, right? So what I'm seeing now is you can do a security token offering, right, through the issuance process.
Yep.
But then after you fundraise, you can use the token as a utility. And so Ethereum is the perfect example, right? There's a lot of people who are arguing that Ethereum's ICO was an offering of a US-based security, right? And when they did that, that security is now used as a utility. And
right.
so I think that you see the USVs, the A16Zs, you know, all these guys who are talking about that has never been seen before, right? You don't buy Apple stock and then use the Apple stock equity to pay your data bill, right? And so they're two separate things normally. Well, now we're in this hybrid world, and so there
right.
needs to be either additions to regulation, evolution of regulation, right? There's got to be something. But until that comes down, you're playing with fire, right? And so if you play with fire, somebody's going to get burnt, right? And right now we're all kind of passing the you know, kind of the potato sack around, hoping that they're not the guy who gets stuck with it, but we'll see.
Well, let me talk about the other side of the equation. Do you see, from your vantage point, an immense brain drain of resources from fiat Fortune 500 companies into the crypto world?
So I was called a sleazy used car salesman because I tweeted one day and I said, if you are not currently working on blockchain, you should go in on Monday and quit your job, right? Because there's an absolute revolution and a transfer of wealth that is occurring right now that, frankly, a lot of employees at these Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies will never get to experience unless they leave. Right. And so, you know, there's a bunch of stats out there that show if you're working at the same job for more than 2 years, you're being underpaid, right? You know, it's
I didn't know that. Really?
Okay. There's been multiple studies that show that, right?
Right.
And so the other thing is, you know, you can either work for yourself, right, and get other people to help you build what you want, or you can go build somebody else's dream, right? And so I'm a big believer that, you know, leaving those kind of cushy jobs, which I've had, right, and they're very cushy, especially out here, and going and working on this, not only is important work, but it provides an opportunity to build real kind of wealth and freedom for somebody. And so, you know, if you're able to take that risk, you should.
Right. So as an entrepreneur or as somebody who's doing a 9-to-5 job, what would your best recommendation be for them on Monday? And how would they find out which company they should go work for?
Yeah, so look, there's every single company in the space is hiring, right? The nice thing about when there's a transfer or technological evolution like this, what ends up happening is capital rushes into the space, right? My guess is probably 80% of the projects being built right now are either not interesting or worthless, right? 20% of them have the potential to change the world. Right, and so we need the waste and the hype to actually let the valuable projects flourish. Right now, the hard part for investors and frankly entrepreneurs is figuring out which is the 20 and which is the 80%. Right, but when that capital rushes in, look, there's companies right now that are sitting on $50, $100 million, and they got less than 10 employees. They literally have runway for like 30 years. Right, so what they can do, they're going to start hiring. Right, and so everyone's hiring. It's not really a matter of how do I go find a job. It's what do you want to work on, and then go find that.
Got it. What are the two projects that you think are very interesting, like in your mind? Two or three?
So I think all of the security token infrastructure is going to be really important, right?
Okay.
I think that if you look at the security token space in particular, it's going to be the largest asset class. There's about $700 trillion of assets that today are illiquid that will come on and be liquid. And so all the infrastructure around issuance, exchanges, kind of post-issuance governance is going to be really important. And the second piece is, look, today we operate in a world where we have paper currency. Right, and I do think that there's going to be a global currency that everyone will use, right? Who that's going to be, I don't know yet. And so I think that there's obviously some leaders, right? And there's people who are working on the problem. And this is everything from the Bitcoins of the world to the stable coins, et cetera. And I'm probably less caught up in all of the drama of who's on which side and all this stuff, and just saying, look, there's going to be a winner, and I think that whoever solves that problem is obviously going to create a lot of value as well. And so between the security tokens and whatever that global currency is, I think that that's going to be a majority of the market.
Any top two that you're looking out for that you feel?
I don't promote any of them because I think, again, 80% of them are worthless, and I'm not probably smart enough to pick out which are the 80.
All right. Well, I know we are out of time, but I want to give audience a question. Anybody has a question? All right.
So token as utility, how about a use case? There's a company called Crowdflower. Are you familiar with them, what they do?
I'm not.
There's a bunch of people that annotate data. And so you can think of them like machine learning, but with human brains, right? Wetware. Could you pay them through a token? The fact that this person is actually doing utility, which could also be a machine, but it could also be a person. Or is that off limits?
So I don't know if I understand the question. I think you're saying that basically there's a token that's used as a utility, and do I think it's a security or utility?
There's a person on the other side of that. So you're hiring someone as, say, like a personal assistant. They're working remotely, and I'm paying them with a particular token. So is that treated as a currency, or am I being exposed by using a token for that?
Yeah, look, I think that they're trying to figure that out right now, right? You've got places like Montana, I think that, or it was Wyoming or Montana came out and said that they think it's a piece of property, right? I think that some people are trying to call it currency. And, I saw something on Twitter one time that said, Bitcoin, for example, or cryptocurrencies is the only thing that is being classified as a property, a currency, an asset, et cetera. And so all of these regulatory bodies are literally fighting over who gets to regulate this stuff, right? And so over time, that'll shake out as to how it gets treated. But, frankly, I don't care. I don't think it really changes anything until that regulation comes down and we kind of know the rules. And so once the rules are established, then just play by the rules.
Anybody else has a question? Paul? Ariel? Yeah, Paul has a question. I know the lights are bright, huh?
It's Paul from Medicert. I'd like to challenge you, Anthony, because you've got the AMA session here, and the majority of the room, a lot of people actually run tokens and ICOs, and you've basically said they're all either stupid or illegal. So I'd like to challenge you on Kurt's question and be brave enough to pick 2 projects that you think are good projects within the entire ecosystem.
Yeah, so I'm not going to do that because, one, if they're unregistered securities, it would be illegal for me to do that. Another rule, and 2 is I've seen the hype and promotion, and if I do that, I'm sure that somebody will tweet it out, and next thing we know, it'll move the market, and everyone will be all upset at me. So I'll refrain from doing that. But to your point about the ones that are worthless, look, there's a lot of projects that people are working on that either the decentralization doesn't need to occur, the utility token isn't needed, or frankly, the technology is just a recreation of something that already exists, right? So I think that that's the first piece. And the second piece is, to be very clear on the utility token side, the part that is illegal, right, or the unregistered security has nothing to do with how the token is used post-issuance. It has to do with the fact that people are selling a unit of ownership or a unit of this token, and they're asking for money in exchange, so there's an issuance of this security, and then those people who are buying it are actually anticipating it to go up in value, but those people have no control over whether it goes up in value or not, right? So the Howey test of the 1933 Securities Act, it's in direct violation. And so, there's projects. There's a project that I'm an advisor to because it has a special place in my heart, right? So it's called STEM Chain. STEM Chain works with charities, and what they essentially did is they created a bunch of tokens. They directly listed onto the Stellar network. There was no issuance, right? So they didn't raise capital, and they said to people, if you buy this token and you donate it to a charity, we will match every single donation, token for token, until we run out of tokens. And so what they actually are doing is they're saying to people, if you donate, STEM.org is one of their partners. And so if you go on and you buy $10 worth of these STEM tokens and you donate to STEM.org, they'll match, and STEM.org will actually receive $20, right? So the reason why that's not a security is because there's no issuance process. Right? It doesn't matter how it's used afterwards. They didn't raise capital, and people don't buy that thinking it's going to go up in value. They literally buy it to give it away. So, in that case, the utility token is not a security. But everyone else who's raising capital, it's a security.
All right, I think we'll have to cut it off, but Anthony is on the floor, so you guys can definitely talk to him and meet with him. Anthony, thank you, but before I let you go, I have one last question. Projection of Bitcoin's price 12 months from now?
So I am on the record as saying Bitcoin's going to be at 50 grand by the end of December.
End of December. Nice. Thank you, Anthony. Appreciate it. You can leave that there. Thank you, guys. Next up, I think, Ariel, your panel is up. So if you're backstage, that'll be great.